Good morning. My name is Mark Rodriguez. I am a member of the Board of Trustees here at St. John's School, and I'm here this morning with Dr. Jean Batiste, Director of Community Inclusion here at St. John's. Jean, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Jean Batiste. I am the Director of Community Inclusion here at St. John's. I serve as the Chief Diversity Officer for the St. John's community.
So Jean and I are going to speak this morning about some of the ongoing efforts here at St. John's with respect to community inclusion, and we'll dive right in. Jean, can you share with the committee a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and how you came to this type of work?
Sure. So I am a third-generation educator, and I have very deep roots here in Houston, Texas, both from my grandparents as well as my parents' generation. I became an educator after getting my master's at the University of North Texas in 1981, aging myself right now. And for 9 years, I taught social sciences at 3 different high schools in Dallas, Texas, ending for the past 5 years of my public school career as the department chair of social sciences at Hillcrest High School in Dallas. And it was in 1990 that I won the Teacher in Excellence Award from the Dallas Independent School District. And ironically, that's what got me out of public schools, because there was some media coverage of that award. And David Hicks, who was headmaster of St. Mark's School of Texas at the time, saw the coverage, and he kind of pursued me to join St. Mark's. And so I left public schools in 1990 to become the first full-time faculty member of color, African-American faculty member at St. Mark's School of Texas. I was there for 9 years and absolutely loved the experience. Learned a lot about boys' education, learned a lot about independent school education, and began to incorporate my background in urban education into this beginning thing that was happening in independent schools called diversity. And it has expanded since then into diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So in addition to teaching AP European History, Psychology, and Sociology, I ran the Dennard Visiting Scholars Program at St. Mark's, and also taught World History, what we called it at that time. But I also began to work in the area of diversity and inclusion. At the same time, I had interest in administration. And so I left St. Mark's in 1999 and went to a small progressive school in St. Louis, Missouri called Crossroads School, an 8 through 12 school where I served as assistant head of school and upper school head, and did that for a year. But at the same time, I was building kind of a national presence. I served on some national committees for the National Association of Independent Schools. So an opportunity came in the year 2000 for me to join NAIS in Washington, D.C. And so left St. Louis, moved to D.C., and was there for 13 years as vice president for first leadership development, professional development, and then for equity and justice, and then field services. Those were the 3 areas where I served at the national level, and I loved it. I loved NAIS. I loved producing conferences, editing books, serving as a facilitator, both domestically and abroad, in the area of leadership development as well as equity and justice. In the midst of all that, in 2000, I went back to school again and got my doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania, finishing that in 2012, and then started a consulting practice. And that's what brought me to St. John's back in 2017. St. John's was in need of a consultant and a facilitator to help after a difficult year, deal with some issues, and to put some framework in place around what we call DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. At the same time, I was looking to be back in Texas after my father passed away 5 years ago, and wanted to be near my mother. And so I was in the search to be do a similar role that I'm doing now at Trinity University in San Antonio, serving as their Chief Diversity Officer, and was offered that position. And Mark Desjardins heard about that opportunity, and he said, we need that role here. And you have all these, over 25 years experience in independent schools. Would you consider doing that on an interim basis? As you recall, it was just supposed to be for a year.
We just needed to get you in the door.
Is that what it was?
Right.
And so I came here to be interim Director of Community Inclusion, and within a month I was asked to do it permanently.
Well, we're very lucky that Mark was proactive and sort of tried to convince you to come here. When you joined St. John's in 2017, what were some of your key goals?
I needed to understand the history of St. John's as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and to get a real sense from John and from the board of some touch points and some real areas for opportunities for growth for the school. And so we were very ambitious in my first year, again, coming from NEIS and having put in place a very strong assessment tool to do the work that I thought was needed. I pitched the idea of having St. John's do the assessment of inclusivity or multiculturalism, or AIM. So the first goal that I had was to do the assessment and to be involved in the assessment and to understand the lay of the land. But also I thought it was important that I build a sense of presence. I mean, I recognized the importance of not just this new role, but the importance of me with the multiple ways I identify in being a presence in the school. So within all three divisions, in the community, with student groups, with parent groups, to just be a presence as a representative of senior leadership, as a representative of the school, to, in that kind of tacit way, share where the school is going, where someone who looks like me, someone with my background, someone with the multiple ways I identify, is adding to where the school wants to go and where it wants to grow in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So that was the first thing that I thought was important, was to find out where we are, where we want to go. We did that through AIM.
And just so we understand, so the AIM survey is designed to provide you a baseline, I guess, of sort of what the state of diversity, community, inclusion, belonging is at St. John's, and allow you to gain that understanding and build from there. Right,
exactly right. But at the same time, we recognize that there was a statement of diversity or something on the website that was both antiquated and not action-oriented. And so I worked with you as a member of the board and as a member of the Community on Inclusion and other members of the committee on recognizing that while we were doing this assessment, we also wanted to consider updating the statement and to think of a statement of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or as we call it here, community and inclusion, that was both aspirational and inspirational, that would share intent, and it would also be meant to inspire. And so after some training of a task force that Mark put together with the board's involvement, with your involvement, and some visioning work that we did that first December, you'll recall, we were in the conference room, we had 3M paper, and you had those 4 dots for the visioning exercise.
And we were creating newspaper headlines.
That's right. We were thinking about newspaper headlines of having achieved work in the area of community inclusion, what that would look like in the Wall Street Journal, in the Houston Chronicle, if it was New York Times. We thought that we would, while we were doing the assessment, that we would ask you and Clay Gwynn to co-chair a writing team to take that visioning work we did, to take the early data that was coming back from AIM, and to craft a statement of community and inclusion. And we talked about what the importance of a statement is, and this has been a growing movement in independent schools for between 15 and 20 years, to have a viable statement that becomes policy because the board passes it or endorses it, to partner with the overall mission of the school that would give the school direction, strategic direction on how to build in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We did all that and the AIM assessment in the first year, which was remarkable. We went from, I would say, 15 to 20 miles per hour to 100 miles per hour in the area of community and inclusion.
I recall, Gene, at one of our board meetings last year, you shared with us the strategic plan that you and Mark had developed for community inclusion. Can you talk to us about how that plan was developed, when it was completed, and exactly who you worked with in preparing that plan?
Sure. So we worked on the plan. This was primarily driven by Mark Desjardins, and Mark did some really good work in terms of higher ed and what is happening in post-secondary education when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And Mark was deeply interested in what the University of Michigan was doing in this area. And so after we got our AIM results and we analyzed those data, and as we were putting the finishing touches on our statement of community inclusion, Mark drew from University of Michigan peer schools in terms of those that we could do some research and see their strategic plans. And Mark developed a first draft of a 3-pillar strategic plan for community inclusion, which is what usually happens after a statement has been written and passed by the board. How, in fact, will you enact and make real this statement of community and inclusion? And so over the summer, as we were finishing up the analysis of the AIM results, and putting the finishing touches on our statement on community and inclusion, Mark, with my assistants, kind of honed in on a 3-pillar strategic plan for community inclusion. The first pillar is to create an inclusive and equitable campus climate. The second pillar is to recruit, retain, and develop a diverse and inclusive school community. That would be both in terms of the student body as well as the adults in the community, the faculty, the staff, and the administrators. And the third pillar would be to have an inclusive and innovative teaching and learning. So everything we're doing in curriculum, co-curricularly, extracurricularly would be involved in that. So what we did in that first, September the 8th, I'll never forget the date, what we did on September the 8th of 2018 at that board retreat was to present the final results of the AIM survey. We presented a draft of the Statement on Community and Inclusion, and Mark developed or presented a first draft of this strategic plan. And so, within a year, we were able to accomplish that. But at the same time, we recognize the real work now needs to begin.
Right, sure. With respect to the Statement on Community Inclusion, it always strikes me, it opens with what I think is a really amazing line.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every member of the St. John's community will be known and loved.
That's right.
I mean, what is the significance of that? How has that been received in the community?
Right.
And why do you, sort of based on your involvement, why did we start there?
Yeah, it's interesting because as co-chair of the writing team, you and Clay Gwynn, along with Mark and the other members of the writing team, which included a student, there were students involved on that team. There were parents as well as faculty that were on that team. And we looked at a number of statements. I brought in statements from schools that I've worked with, as well as peer schools, and I brought in even a couple of corporate statements and statements from higher ed. So we had a lot that we had to cull through to try to pinpoint how other statements started. And while they all sounded very lofty and aspirational, Mark was very clear on saying, we want to start with the basics. yes, we need to be both vision focused and mission focused, but let's just start with the basics here. And so what Mark kind of threw out there that kind of grew into the opening line of the statement was, I want everyone to be loved. I want everyone to feel that they belong here at St. John's, just bottom line. And, and I'm going to turn this interview around and say, how did you all take that, from there, how in fact did you have that grow into the rest of this very comprehensive statement?
Right. Well, I'll say we were incredibly lucky to have Mark, because you're right, that concept, every member of the St. John's community, every student will be known and loved, began with Mark. I mean, that was his stamp on the statement, among others. We were really lucky to have Clay Quinn, who's an alum, a parent, a member of the faculty, sort of driving the process and really sort of taking, bringing all of his perspectives. I think, as you said, we looked at lots of statements and they were all very good, but I think for us, we wanted it to sound meaningful. We didn't want it to sound like it was something that you would find on any website.
Right.
And I think that opening line, as simple as it is, I think really sets the tone. And I'll say, I mean, my wife and I have two daughters, one who graduated last year and a current 8th grader. And there's not a lot that I do that gets their attention. But that statement and that line, both of them commented on it. And to me, that was really telling that with all they had going on, that caught their attention. So to me, that, and at least in our house, that was sort of the clearest proof that was absolutely the right way to start that statement.
And then what follows is a very comprehensive kind of declaration, if you will, of how that first line, every member of the St. John's community will be known and loved, what that will look like, what that will sound like, and more importantly, what that will feel like through these 3 pillars of our strategic plan. And so, I will say that it is a very comprehensive statement. It's a longer statement than I'm used to seeing from an independent school, but it's such a St. John statement. And, I believe in providence. I'm a spiritual person, and I can't imagine that we here in the fall of 2020, I'm not sure if we would have been in a position to be able to handle a lot of the terrible things that have happened since May of 2020 as a school community, had it not been for that statement and how we have built community and inclusion since that statement was adopted and passed by the board back in 2018. It's because of that statement that we were able to put in an infrastructure to have 7 faculty associates work directly with division heads and me on, and Chris Curtin on implementing the strategic plan in all 3 divisions of our school. It's because of that statement that we were able to develop a parent committee of 22 parents representing all 3 divisions to work on parent engagement and parent education. It's because of that statement that we were able to strengthen the work of our Unity Council and of our affinity groups in the upper school so that we had a framework. We had everything we needed to be able to build the 8 forums that we did this summer for our faculty and staff to deal with the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and police brutality and this third reckoning of race that we're dealing with within our country. It's because of that statement that I was able to facilitate 10 parent focus groups this summer to find out what was in their collective heads and hearts as it related to everything from this summer, in addition to where they want to see the school grow in the area of community and inclusion. None of the great work that we've been able to do since September 8th of 2018 would have happened had it not been for the adoption by our board of that statement.
So you talked to us, Gene, about many of the things that have come out of the strategic plan. In terms of our progress, in terms of the steps we've taken, from my perspective, it's all been very positive, but I know that there's a lot of work that remains to be done. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. there is a lot of work to be done, and I think that the challenge for us is to move that work forward within the times we're in, within having to do school in a new way for a while. Within this virtual environment or this hybrid environment or this low density enrollment plan that will start next week. So we clearly have had to pull back a little bit on our momentum in terms of our programming and in terms of our goals, but only pull back, not stop. So, I am meeting with our faculty associates Friday of this week. I am working with Chris Curran and our division heads, and with Mark. In fact, Mark and I just last week talked about how we're going to update those 3 pillars and what we're going to focus in on this year. So we're not resting on the laurels of what we've achieved in the past 3 years. No, nor are we completely stopping our work because we're in this pandemic. We're simply modifying this, the speed with which we're going so that we're able to continue the momentum while at the same time dealing with school in a new way.
Sure. Gene, we've discussed all of the work that's been done here. In terms of how we at St. John's compare with respect to community inclusion in our efforts, how do we compare to other independent schools in Houston and Texas and across the nation?
Part of me kind of bristles with the question itself because on the one hand, coming from my time at NEIS, Pat Bassett, who was my second boss, and even Peter Relic, who was my first boss at NEIS, we at the national level were very adamant that we did not want to do anything with ranking. We didn't like the U.S. News and World Report, or there's just this general notion of how we stack up. But on the other hand, we do want to know, and it is important to compare. And we belong to Index as a school, which is a way of kind of benchmarking our efforts in a lot of areas, including community and inclusion. So I will say that, in my 25 years working at the local, regional, and national level, we are definitely in the tier 1 when it comes to community and inclusion. And I say that because the infrastructure that we have established in just 3 years, from doing a full-scale assessment to creating a statement, to creating a strategic plan, to building a distributed leadership model with faculty, staff, and parents, and strengthening the work of students, usually occurs in independent schools in more like 8 to 10 years. And we did it in 3. And so I think that we're tier 1. When it comes to the work that we have done, but we will not stay at that tier unless we continue to dig deep, unless we continue to realize that this is head and heart work that we're doing, that involves every member of the school community, as every member of the school community was involved in AIM. This is not, the Gene show, as I like to say, but the goal moving forward to keep our tier 1 is for every member of our school community to find their place in this work. Because to have everyone in the St. John's community be known and loved means that everyone in the St. John's community must help to make that so.
So we've talked about the strategic plan, we've talked about the statement on community inclusion. How do those things fit with the broader mission statement of the school and the key values that are so integral to the school?
Right. They fit hand in glove. And in fact, it's, to go back to the creation of the statement, which you and Clay co-chaired with the writing team, one of the documents that was paramount in our review was the St. John's mission statement and the precepts and the core values of our school. You will find elements and key words from our overall mission within the statement of community inclusion. So it's hand in glove. That statement is hand in glove with the overall mission of our school. And I think that our challenge is going to be to make sure that interweaving of both of those statements continues, in the years to come.
Gene, obviously, from my perspective, again, as a trustee, as a parent, as a committee member, I think we've done a number of great things on the community inclusion front here at St. John's. And we're so incredibly lucky that Mark was able to persuade you to not continue down I-10 to St. to come here. Is there anything else you'd like to share with respect to your work here, or the sort of the efforts that we have ongoing?
Sure. I am looking forward to expanding our strategic plan to look for new ways in which we can just reinforce and live into that statement on community and inclusion, and particularly that first line. I'm ready for us to focus in on the level at which every constituent group in our school works on their cultural competency, and particularly in our classrooms and in our teaching and our learning, how we build culturally relevant teaching and learning and culturally relevant pedagogy. And there are a number of principles and models for that. And so I think what will sustain what we have built so far is to make sure that cultural competency and culturally relevant teaching and learning are within everything we do as a school community. This is not about being politically correct right now. This is as we are in this election year, something else we're going to be focusing in on is how we prepare for this election, how we do it in our 3 divisions, how we do it with colleagues, how we do it and share with our parent community, how we're doing it. So I think that the work ahead for us is to take this very important framework through our statement, through our strategic plan, and now build these 2 key areas for the entire school community: cultural competence and culturally relevant teaching and learning.
Gene, thank you so much for your leadership on this very important issue, for all you've done for St. John's, and thank you for taking the time to visit with us this morning.
But thank you, Mark, and thank you for the partnership of not only you as a trustee, but also as a member of the Committee on Community, and as a parent. And so I think that synergy that we have has really supported not only what we've done together, but what we've helped to facilitate. And as we kind of quipped before, we should probably take this on the road, and
Right,
we can help other schools with the way we've been able to do it here.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you.
Mark.
Thank you.